Member Hanson was able to join us. Traffic was a little intense, I understand. So welcome. We're still short. Member Moss said he'll be joining us around 11, and Vice Chair Belknap is with us via Zoom. Okay, we're to item number 4, general consent calendar. Members, at this time, this is the opportunity to pull things off the calendar. So don't. Ooh, we got some feedback or something. Member. Okay, Member Earl.
I'm trying to pull it up real quick. Okay.
Member Earl.
Yeah, I would like number 3 and number 4 pulled.
Number 3 and 4. Number 3 is an action item, grants for approval. Number 4 is an action item, World Language Standards Review. Okay. Member Hymas.
I believe Member Hanson is before me, but I'm happy to poll 4.5 if you allow me to.
So I think they're working on this. So 4 is already polled. Number 5. 4. Oh, number 5. Sorry. Thank you. What leaves 1, 2, 6, 7, and 8. So does someone want to make the motion to approve the consent? I'm seeking a motion to approve the consent calendar with item 3, 4, and 5 polled. Items 3, 4, and 5 polled. Member Cannon, so moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Bunch of seconds. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we'll go to Member Earl. You've got items 3 and 4. Should we start with 3?
Sure. I'm pulling
Again, I'm
it
going
up.
to turn this. Well, I think we're good. We're not getting the feedback now.
Okay. This particular item, I would like us to wait on it and get more information. While it says this project is a 5-year strategic plan, the money's for hiring someone to develop a strategic plan for the, what's the name of it? The food to farm to, where am I looking? Farm to school grants. I would really like to know what that means exactly, if it's helping get fresh produce to our schools. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. I think that's great. But equity in the food system, I don't know what that is. I don't know. I mean, I have an idea, but I don't know. So what I'm saying is I want the grant program in front of us, and I had to go searching for the grant program. I would like that before us, and I want to know what our role is in that, and whether it's really the role that the state board and the schools should be playing in the first place, depending on what that grant looks like.
So you have a question regarding that, so we have staff to speak to it. I will invite all USBE staff that want to respond to the question on the why and what. So please state whoever wants to respond first. Name and title.
Hi, Kathleen Britton, Child and Children's Programs Director, and I have with me Kate Wheeler, who is our farm to specialist, school
Okay,
specialist.
and
That will
if you can get a little closer to the mic, I think it'll pick up
Okay.
for our people that are remote.
Britton,
Thank
Child
you.
Nutrition Programs Director, and I have with me Kate Wheeler, who is our Farm to School Specialist, and she will explain to you the urgency of this grant. It cannot wait due to the fact that we have to have our intent letter sent into USDA.
Okay.
Hi, Kate Wheeler, Child Nutrition Specialist. So our full grant application is actually due on January 10th. So that is before the next board meeting. So that's why we were hoping to get approval today. Just to provide some more information and background on what we're trying to do. So we have, I lead our state's farm to school efforts, which cover a big range of local procurement, agricultural education, school garden support, and I lead a coalition from a lot of different groups called the Farm to Fork Task Force. So those are other state agency partners, those are local nonprofit partners like Wasatch Community Gardens and Youth Garden Project, Get Healthy Utah. And that group, pretty much the way it works right now, or the way it should work for Farm to School, is that should be a true collaboration, right? All our stakeholders should be coming together and working towards shared goals. That's not what happens right now. Right now, I pick projects and beg people to help me work on them. And so what we really want is to really have a strategic vision so that we're not just doing what's convenient or based on feedback that I've managed to extract from a few schools. We really want to have a solid plan where we all are invested in the same goals and we're working towards the same vision, which is to build stronger communities. Farm to School helps our kids, it helps our schools, it helps our farmers. So one of the things I've been working on is with staff from USDA Office of Community Food Systems is coming up with a plan for the strategic planning process. So we've already started on that process. And in January, we're going to be holding a statewide visioning session with all our stakeholders. That's our first step, is nailing down what our shared vision really is. Right now, our task force has a vision. I don't think any of us could come forward and tell you what it is right off the cuff because people haven't really bought into it. But as we progress to that plan, we want to have some in-person meetings. We're looking for some funding for that so that we can give our stakeholders stipends, travel stipends to attend those meetings. And then we are looking to pull in a consultant for the last stage of that so that we have somebody who's really an expert in this work of really refining that plan once we have our objectives. We want somebody who does this, right? Like that's why consultants make so much money because it is a very specialized job, and somebody who's really familiar with food systems and with what it takes to bring everybody together around that work, specifically in Utah. So that's what we're hoping to do with this grant.
Before we have additional questions, maybe some additional background would be good for the board. This is very familiar. I mean, this doesn't seem new to me, but is this a brand new program or is it like another one that was there before? Can you speak to that to see if we've done it before or this is brand new?
So we've been working on Farm to School as a state for about 10 years. We've had individual schools do things individually, and I've been here before to talk to you guys about different projects, so that's probably part of why it's pretty familiar. So we have a lot of individual pieces that we're using to support Farm to School activities, like we do a local reimbursement program that's directly tied to schools serving local food. We have a Harvest of the Season program that celebrates seasonal Utah produce. But what we want is to really make sure those projects we're doing are getting at the root causes that are preventing our schools from serving really high quality meals focused, like rooted in our agricultural community.
Okay, because it seemed really familiar to me, but I thought, is this really different than what we've done? It's just taking it to a little bit more of a different level. Okay, Member Earl?
I want to know what the details are of the work, whatever the work is. I understand that it's highly beneficial to have kids raise gardens, right? It's wonderful to have people eat fresh produce. But is that the work of this strategic group, or is the work of this strategic group something else? And that's all I want to know. And I appreciate this, and I'm not questioning, what's going on.
So
I
you're
just
asking,
don't know.
you might be asking, what is different than what we have done before, and what is that different? What are those expectations of students, faculty? I think that's where you're going. How is this more than what we did before?
And is it the role of the state board and of government, because this is the FDA, to facilitate the coordination of local farmers to put food on the table of cafeterias? Is that the role of government in this? That's another question.
But you can ask
Yeah.
that. you can ask yourself that question or ask the board as they're considering the motion, I believe. But can you speak? I'm wanting to get to where Board Member Earl's concerns are.
For
Thank you.
sure. No, I would love to help address those. So, child nutrition programs are funded by the USDA, and that is one of their priorities is farm to school. And that's why they have this Office of Community Food Systems to support this work. And that's why my job is farm to school, is because they've identified that as a priority to support kids and farmers, which is the goal of the National School Lunch Program. That's why it was first created, actually, was to both create healthier children and support U.S. farmers.
So, Superintendent wanted to weigh in too to help with the question, I believe.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of an actual example, so.
Can you get closer to your mic?
Yes,
Or bring it closer to you?
I
Thank
will
you.
do that. I want to make sure that anytime Board Member Lear wants to get out and hula hoop, that I haven't
Okay, thank you.
haven't created a problem, a barrier. So, one of the real visceral examples that you might have been a part of, every year on the Hill, Kate does an amazing job of leading an effort around, as part of her work, having farmers come in with apples. So you see kindergartners, I think maybe some preschoolers, first graders, but they're everywhere in the rotunda. They learn all about apples. They have activities. It's sort of like Apple Day on the Hill. And local farmers come in and actually provide the apples. And how actually this, not only this year, I think they've done this in the past, Kate, but they actually teach about the production and kids knowing where their food's coming from and learning the nutritional value of an apple. So it's always a fun day, one of my favorite days on the Hill, and you see legislators come out and participate. But that's just, that's one small example of a cooperative agreement through Kate's work, that it's part of our wonderful CMP program. I think, I feel as a superintendent, grateful that in our state, it is part of our office. In other states, it's not. Is that correct? It's part of Department of Agriculture under the governor's office or other places. But for us, we feel like nutrition is part of a child's learning, an important part of the day. And so it is part of education where we come from. And I'm really grateful that we have CMP in our office. I just wanted you to know that, that's unique. And Kate has been doing this work. And I think you've been a part of some of it. She's presented it here before.
Okay, did you have more to add?
I just wanted to say that, we are doing right now, what's happening basically is a lot of those individual projects like Superintendent mentioned, right? But our main three goals with Farm to School are really, we want to increase agricultural education, we want to increase local foods and school meals, and we want to increase school garden capacity and access. But what we don't know right now is why specifically that's not happening in Utah, and why, what we can do as a group really collaboratively to address that. We've tried a lot of individual projects. We want to make sure they're really coordinated. And so that is what we're hoping to do. That is what we're working on, and we're hoping to use this grant to just make it more effective as we fund that work.
Okay.
I'm all for that. I'd like to see it on paper. That's all I'm saying. I want to see exactly what we're doing. I don't want it left open to someone that we're hiring as a consultant to come in and say, this is what we're going to do. Does that make any sense? I'm all for what's being said here. Let's put it on paper.
Well, the grant and all that process, I know you want to see it on paper, but it requires LEA. If I might be able to speak. Oh, well, again, I guess I'm the chair. From a LEA's perspective, they make choices and how engaged they're in here. So I don't think this program goes right to any kind of sensitive place that requires a whole bunch of scrutiny, because the LEAs choose in and out and how much participation. But I think the whole focus is to do more of it, because from the cafeteria's perspective or the food side, there's not a lot of options/opportunities. And I can speak just from when I was on a local board, and I still see it relevant today with food chain challenges and everything of getting food, is why don't we use more of our locally grown? And the emphasis is make sure schools, not just children, are aware of it. And then as that happens, that then children have a learning experience of, oh, my apples came from Santaquin, my cheese came from Beaver or Cache Valley. And I think that's what you're trying to do here within this grant. So it doesn't seem different than anything that I've seen in the past, except that there's more due diligence to make, more attempts to make it happen. And correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's exactly right. And, our goal with all our programs is we're trying to make sure we're providing resources that empower our LEAs to do their best work, right? It's up to them if they want to participate in Farm to School, but we believe that's part of having an excellent child nutrition program. And so we want to make sure that we are really giving them what they need. And like through this process, we're hearing from all our different stakeholders about what's actually going to solve those problems.
And there's
break down
another
the
part of
barriers.
this where LEAs want to use local, but they want to make sure it meets all the criteria and guidelines of the funding agency that's reimbursing it. I'm not sure how many grams of protein. I can't remember everything that they measure, but I know some things are off the menu now because things aren't meeting a certain quality. But Member Klein, did you have a comment?
I was just wondering if you answered Jenny's question on what is equity in the food system or building equity into the food system.
Yeah, so one of the overall benefits of Farm to School, so not like specifically this grant or anything, but just in general, when you do these activities, you build a stronger food system for everyone who's a part of it. Right now, a lot of times, farmers or farm workers aren't necessarily, they work really hard. That's one of the hardest jobs you can have, and it's really hard for them to make a living. Our school cafeteria staff also work really hard, and in a lot of cases, it's not a job with a lot of room for growth or professional development. It's a hard work, low reward job, and throughout the food chain, that's true. When you start to be more transparent about who you're buying your food from, and everybody's learning about, how it got to the table, and those people because you're in your community, it becomes a lot easier to make sure that you have a fair system there and that everybody is really being rewarded for the work that's putting into getting really, really healthy and important food to our kids.
Okay, Member Hanson? And then Cannon?
I was just wondering kind of on process and procedure here. So we have this grant that needs to be submitted now in January, is that right? Mm-hmm. And so the board wouldn't have a chance to review the actual grant submission before it goes in, is that right?
It is due before the next board meeting. I'm happy to let people see it before then and share that information, but it would need to be submitted before the January 13th board meeting.
So and I know it's probably not helpful for this process, but is there a way that we could, we've been aware of this for some time, I guess. Is there a way that we could get it to the board so that we would have a chance to look at the details and review that? Because in concept, all sounds good, but the devil's in the details sometimes, and we just don't have a chance to look at those right now. So again, maybe not so helpful for this time, but maybe for the future, we could try to ratchet things back a couple of months and give us a chance to look at that.
Okay, Member Cannon?
Yeah, just a quick question. It says here you want approval to apply for this grant, and you want to use the grant monies to hire strategic planning consultants. So how much money are we looking at for doing this? Because all the forms attached to were blank. So
the maximum grant award is $100,000. So we're going to be asking for that amount between funding some of our workshops and paying for some of those costs and for the consultant. And I'm still waiting for some of our quotes to come back for that to know exactly how that will be divided out.
okay, I thought that was salient information that we didn't have, so thank you.
Okay, Member Lear?
Thank you. I just know enough about the CNP program that I fully support a more coordinated effort as part of it. And time is of the essence. I hear what Member Hanson and Member Earl are saying, and yes, I'd like to maybe see some more detail going forward, but I also think that letting this opportunity pass to get some money that doesn't cost the state, and we're all taxpayers, so it certainly are our taxes going to the federal government, but I would like to be able to use that to have a concerted effort to bring this program, to bring more coordination to this program. And that's what I hear you're going to do. And given the circumstances and the timing, I'm comfortable with the information I have.
Cindy, I see are you wanting to, we're talking about item 3. Do you have
No.
any other question on it, or
Oh,
you make?
my question was, just since I see no more lights, what motion I need right now do I need a motion to end debate on this, or?
No, you can make a,
do we need a motion at
well,
all?
if somebody wants to make a motion to approve, they can, or nothing happens, nobody makes a motion for anything, and it's,
Okay, then I'm not going to make a motion, but I am going to use this second, and I hope it is related more than tangentially, but I want to thank Kathleen Britton, whom I heard on KSL a while back, who did a fabulous job representing USBE and the children of this state and talking about, I believe it was difficulties with supply chain and a whole bunch of other things that impact our children and our families and our schools. And she was articulate and intelligent and represented us so well, so thank you for that.
So if we don't have a motion on 4.3,
Well,
okay, Member Lear.
I maybe missed my opportunity, but I'll make a motion that we approve this application for a grant so that we don't miss the opportunity for to do this in a better way. And yes, going forward, I'd like more information.
Okay, before you speak to the motion, your motion is.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You're
It's
fine.
just to
Your mo-
approve it.
you're-
Thank you.
We're
I always
perfectly
do that.
fine. Your motion is to approve the grant application, well, approve 4.3, which is that grant application. Is there a second before you speak to it? Member Hanson? That, okay. Oh, another second down. Okay, you want to speak to your motion?
I think I said most of it. I just think we shouldn't miss this opportunity to bring greater coordination to a program that everybody seems to agree is helpful for the farmers, for the children, for the schools, and CNP is part of our office. And I want to be supportive of anything that brings greater coordination and a more streamlined, effective process. Especially, I heard Kate mention in passing that this doesn't seem to be growing the way that we'd like to see it growing. So yes, I'd like to know why. Everybody else seems to think it's healthy, and it seems healthy to me. So that's why.
Member Booth?
I echo and support everything that Board Member Lear is suggesting. My only concern as we move forward with similar kinds of items that would be placed on a consent agenda would be to make sure that we have more information. Because you could, I know it's a lot of work, but you could have given just those basic parameters, such as the question that Board Member Cannon had in terms of what's the total amount. That would have allayed a lot of our concerns, because we feel responsibility in giving approval for whatever it is that's being presented to us. I mean, it is our responsibility, and we take it seriously. Board Member Earl takes every single item on this agenda, and we all are very much aware of how careful and thoughtful she is. So in no way are we trying to slow down the process, but we do need enough information that we can make an intelligent decision. So in the future, it would be most helpful, especially when something's placed on a consent agenda where there really isn't normally a chance to have a discussion like this unless we pull it off of the consent agenda. We have to have our ducks in a row and know what it is we're voting on, so we're not wasting time.
So, and I just want to remind the body that we do have a process, that's why it's put in way in advance, that board members, if they do have a question, they can ask that question before the meeting and not go through discovery, because I'm not protecting staff, but in a lot of times we can write a lot of theses on things that are on our agenda and or our consent calendar, and the opportunity is for the board to ask those questions. We have a process, and if they do that, a lot of the times the question asked, if we follow the guidance that we already have in that space, we can all benefit with a additional information that can be added to our packet or something else. So I want to make sure we have that invitation in place too. But I just want to remind everyone of that particular process. Member Hanson? Member Norton?
I just wanted to say that having lived through a period of time in child nutrition where the request for healthier food came from the federal down to the state, I am very grateful to see something come from our local areas and move up. So, that's one thing I look forward to seeing with this. Our kids can know that their food came from Utah.
Member Earl?
Yeah, I won't be supporting this at this time. I do support the efforts. I would still like to see when it gets put together, if you wouldn't mind, send that on to us. I did call ahead, and if you remember, I didn't actually ask a question at the first. You clarified into a question, which is fine, and I had further questions, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
And if I could just add, we were scrambling a little bit to get this one on the agenda this time, so I've noted that feedback, and that's on us. We'll try to be move a little quicker on that next time, because we certainly want to have the opportunity to answer all your questions, and I appreciated the phone call from Board Member Earl about that so that we could talk.
Okay, we do have a motion on the table, and the motion is to approve out of the general consent calendar 4.3, which is grants for approval, as shown in our packet. We'll vote on this. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
For the noes, Member Klein and Member Earl. Okay, Member Earl on item 4.4.
Yes, and I think, do you want to speak to this? The option here is only to approve on the consent calendar, but we don't meet the rubric requirement for approval. And so there should be two options available here. And I guess I would make them, well, I don't know if go ahead and then we'll.
So but if you want to make a motion, you're certainly,
Okay.
this is your opportunity.
Well, I'd
There's-
like to make a motion that we do not, well, no, I'm going to have to.
Let me
make
help
sure
you
you're
with
right.
that.
Okay,
We
help me
either
with
do
it.
or we don't. So you could say
don't.
that the board approves staff or to not begin. So the motion is to not begin the standards revision process for world languages standards.
That would be my motion.
I'm just wanting to
Okay,
help you.
thank you.
So is there a second to that motion? Second, Member Hutchins, to speak to your motion.
And I'll
Thank you.
quickly speak to it. The criteria, the reason why we put the rubric together is so we would know whether or not to actually do this. And the criteria does not meet the threshold at this current time. And so I would recommend that we didn't go through all that process with the expense and the time and all of that unless it's necessary. And so those are my comments, but I think Jennifer Thronson could speak to that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, and a debate or discussion to the motion. Member Hanson?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe this is a question for staff. We've had two of these now. I forget which one came up last month and the month before, where the rubric said not to go ahead with a revision to the standard, but it still came up as an approve in the consent calendar. I'm wondering if we need to take a look at the rubric, if staff's opinion or staff's feeling is that we do need to go ahead with these revisions and the rubric is not matching. That rubric gives us a number, but the content of the rubric is very subjective. The weighting, the people who are weighing in for the rubric, I mean, there's a lot of variables inside. If we're not getting the right answer, if we have questions about that, I think maybe that's what we need to do, and that's my question for staff is, is it time to look at that? And one more, maybe you can answer these both together. Is there a time period where a standard just goes stale, where after 10 years, we just need to revise it no matter what the rubric says? Those two, please.
Dr. Swanson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the rubric, it is working. I think our recommendation as staff, we are told not to direct the board to do things. So we really should have said option 1, approve moving forward, option 2, don't approve moving forward, and then we could put a staff recommendation. In this case, staff recommends not moving forward. The rubric, the feedback from the field on the annual survey, the feedback from communicating with world language teachers tells us they're satisfied with their standards, they're working. There's not a call to arms for this particular one at this time. So staff would recommend putting it back in the 7-year cycle and allowing it to come. With that said, the rubric would be the part that might cue it earlier than that 7-year cycle. So in 10 years or 3 years from now, we might see a call from the field. We might see the annual survey saying these are getting stale, it's time. And then we would bring to you as the board a request to take something out of sequence and do the revision then. So what this decision today would say is we're going to go ahead and move it to 7 years, but it doesn't prevent staff from coming to you in between this 7-year cycle and the next to say we are ready for that movement. World language, you can imagine, has not evolved in lots of ways in terms of what you're teaching students. The part that evolves is the pedagogy, but not the actual standards of the instruction. So you're going to see a little more static in that space compared to other contents that do evolve a little more quickly. And so I think the rubric is working. I think what we did that could be better is just, as staff, we worry about telling you how to proceed, and so finding a way to do that better in the board recommendation section that doesn't feel like we're telling you, but that we can also put a staff recommendation of what we would like to see and still allow you the opportunity of yes or no. And I think that's the part that I need to work on, if that helps.
Okay, do a follow-up?
Quick follow-up. So maybe the issue is just including it in the consent calendar. When we do that, it is, I mean, it's a yes vote normally, and if the recommendation of staff or if the intended action is to go ahead with the revision, and that just pushes us into that, even if the rubric says the wrong thing. So I think the action needs to match the rubric if it's going to be on the consent calendar.
So let me repeat the motion. The motion is that we do not begin the standard review revision process for world languages standards. That's a motion that's on the table. Vice Chair Davis?
Did you already make did someone already make the motion? Okay.
Well, you were
I
ahead
call the
of her.
previous
So I'm
question.
trying to follow this as best I can.
I call the previous question.
What's that?
I call the previous question.
Okay, that's to end debate. We'll see. You're still in the queue, but it's not debatable to end debate. It takes 2/3 of this body to end debate. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, so we're moving to the previous questions. I mean, we're going to be voting on this. The motion before the board is that we not begin the standards revision process for world languages standards. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Member Earl, I believe that completes yours. Thank you. Member Hymas, you had number 5, which is an actionable item, Utah State Instructional Materials Commission.
Yes, thank you. First off, I want to point out that after looking over some of the reviews, there is at least one reviewer that was fantastic. Gave a lot of detailed information, and I truly appreciated that. Unfortunately, there were several others that we didn't really get to see much on the books that were being reviewed. And some of my concern with this process, one of them I looked at several health books. I looked at several of the history books, and the health books that were recommended put topics such as human development and healthy relationships in the back seat. In fact, the two high school level recommended textbooks did not even contain these said topics, and so I have a hard time, honestly, supporting that. And so, rather, they're asked to be supplemented. And I did reach out to staff, and I don't know if staff is here to comment on these further. They're welcome to. But additionally, the AP US history textbook that is a primary recommendation has 0 notes as to why it is a primary recommendation. There was an AP US history and politics textbook that gave fantastic explanations of why it was not recommended, and I truly appreciated that kind of work. And so I don't know if I necessarily have a motion for this, but I am not willing to stand behind this and say, yeah, this is a great list that I'm happy to support.
So
I know.
yeah, you're
I'm
fine
sorry.
because you're speaking against it. So what you've done everything right. It was pulled off. It goes to debate. You're speaking to if you have a question of staff, this is the time to do it, but I'm not seeing one yet, but you are also taking a position of not supporting it for certain reasons, but a good time to say that too is once there's a motion on the table. So everything's fine. So
Okay.
is there any questions? Do you have any specific questions for staff on this instructional materials review?
Yeah, Molly, you're welcome to speak to whatever, but like I said, I asked my questions, they were answered, but not in a way that really got me going.
Got you convinced?
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
So let's see if we have some questions for staff. Member Earl, you're in the queue.
I had to do quite a bit of digging to get to stuff, and I guess that's my little bit of my concern. We have just broad listing, and then so many were not approved, and then I had to go find it, and then I had to, which I was fine to do, but it just took quite a bit of time for that. I guess if there's more somehow to present that to us in a way that we can, correlate what's not approved, with the actual document that we have on here. So, and I understand that clicking minus, but it took just a little bit to locate things and find it. And maybe that's an education process on my behalf, but like I said, it was a little laborious maybe. So,
Okay, thank you. Member Hart.
Thank you. My concern and my questions are about the process more. And I don't know if I'm just responding to current events and as an educator with materials and material selection, but my difficulty in standing behind this is the material or the information I was able to find that would also be what constituents would want to know isn't really apparent or available. And the process by which the materials end up on this list, I'm not confident I'm not confident in that process. So my understanding is that there are reviewers, and this is a question, even though it's not really in the form of a question. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are reviewers that are educators that are selected, and it's less than 5, I think 3, and then it comes to specialists here at USPE, and then it gets put on a list that districts or schools or LEAs can use to feel confident in their material selection. Is that?
I guess the question is, can you speak to the process, high level without it being a 1-hour studies session of how we get it to before the board?
Yes.
So if you state name, rank, serial number, all that good stuff. Is the light on? I can't. There's a button to push, and you have to kind of get close to the mics now so that people can hear that are streaming.
Alan Griffin, Curriculum Content Specialist, State Board. The process is a fairly lengthy one in some regards. It takes about 6 months to go through. We send out information to publishers that we're going to have a review. They come and participate or say they're going to participate. They add information about the items that they would like to review. Because of COVID, these last 2 or 3 reviews we have done completely online, when before we used to invite people in, and it was a really good experience to have people converse with one another, and the teachers really enjoyed that experience. But we go to specialists then in the state board and ask them to give us a list of qualified educators who they think could review these materials. We go to those lists and we send out solicitation to them, and we ordinarily have at least 3 reviewers whenever possible. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. As an example, there's only one teacher in the state of Utah who teaches sheet metal. And so if we have to review a sheet metal book, we only have one reviewer who can help us with that. But normally we have 3 reviewers at least, and sometimes more, 4 or 5, to look at materials. They have been meeting online, and because of the COVID situation, they conversed via email. Some of them got together on Zoom, and some of them did some other things, and came up with some kind of a consensus as to what they felt like was the review, and they write it out. The review has many parts. It has not only selected items that are in a rubric, but it also has a place for narratives. Some reviewers will be extensive with their narratives. Others will not. They'll just simply go through the rubric. Once they have completed their work, then I send out notification to specialists in the state board and say to them, the reviewers are complete. Would you like to review their work? And they go through and check some things and let me know. Then the one step you missed is it goes to the Instructional Materials Commission. And when the Instructional Materials Commission consists of 5 lay members, as well as 6 educators, including a dean of the College of Education, a high school principal, elementary principal, high school teacher, and elementary teacher. So the Instructional Materials Commission gets together and they go over the reviews once more, and they make some edits, they make some recommendations, and then I'll go back to specialists one more time and say, here's what the commission said. Now, we would like to recommend these to the state board. I don't ever look at the content specifically. I'm more interested in the process to see what's being done, because I don't have expertise in all those areas. But once all that process has taken place, then it's submitted to the state board and it comes to you generally on the consent calendar.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, follow up. I'm just checking other lights to see if
yeah.
superintendent wanted in.
I guess maybe this is a question for Director Thompson. Do we have any data on how the results, the commission's findings are used by LEAs?
Sure. So Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. And so we have some districts that have a policy at their local board level that only allows them to use USB approved reviewed materials. We have plenty of LEAs that do not have that requirement, but there are some. You might be able to give a quantity, but it really depends on the local policy as to whether they use our reviews. They're not required to by law. It's a service we provide. And some LEAs do have a local policy that requires them to only use USB approved material.
Okay. Superintendent Dixon?
Just, I'm going to put a pin in the approved versus recommended. And I find that there's some LEAs who still believe or kind of have that historical perspective of approved materials. It's recommended, right, Alan? So we don't even use the word approved in the materials. And so I think there still is some misunderstanding in local policies that because it's approved, when really it's just there are recommended categories. If, as board members, if you haven't been to the website, I can send you that link to make it easier. But I think we also need to be mindful of what Board Member Earl said as well. Is it searchable when you're trying to find both the process and the materials? So the materials, you can go to a content and find it, but the process and the background information, I think, Board Member Hymas, you were talking about that transparency as well. So that's something we can work on.
Thank you. Member Hutchings?
Permission to ask a question.
Yes.
Is there a timeliness issue so that if we do not take action today on this and have another month to get a little more detail? I admit I did not dig as deeply as Member Hymas and Member Earl did, and really didn't feel like I had any information about the review outcomes, and I'd feel a lot better if I could review those first. Would that work for your timeline?
May I comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we will operate according to what the board recommends to us and tell us what we do. However, we're on kind of a 6-month cycle, and probably next Monday, I will start the process for the spring review, which reviews career and technical education titles. So, and publishers, of course, are anxious to get this information out to school districts so they can adopt things for the next school year or whenever the time comes around for them to do so.
Tim, there's a good question. I was going to ask the same. Member Lear.
And I also had the same question, so thank you for that, about the timeliness of this approval. I have another question related to what Member Hymas asked and noted that some of the reviewers gave more detailed information. I wondered if there are directions given to the reviewers in terms of how much, what detail they should be given. That's part of my question. And then secondly, I'm assuming this is a volunteer effort on part of reviewers. Are they paid for this?
May I
Yes,
respond?
please respond. Yeah.
When we were meeting face-to-face, it was somewhat of a volunteer effort because we paid for substitutes, but that's all. But since we have not been meeting face-to-face, we are paying reviewers for their time outside of their school day to do the reviews. So yes, they are paid. I think we pay them $50 per review that they do. And it generally takes a couple of hours, probably even more than that, because there's a difficulty of trying to communicate with the other members online to get it done.
And then the other question of what directions are they given in terms of
the directions.
how much, what are they asked to provide? Maybe that's part of the breakdown if they don't know if you want a phrase or if you want 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, we give them instructions, and one of the things that I have asked for them to do specifically, which apparently we need to hit a little harder, is we'd like to have them make comments and narratives after the selection of the items in the rubric. The items in the rubric were designed so that there is some explanation there, some significant explanation, and hopefully it speeds up the process for reviewers to go through and select the items that are in the rubrics. But there are spaces after each item for them to write a narrative. And if I may, I would like to comment about the structure of the computerized process. We are still in development and almost complete of a brand new review machinery, I guess I would say. We have hired out a bunch of programmers who've been putting this together. It's much superior to the system that we've had in the past. I mean, we have pictures of items, we have descriptions suggested by the publishers. And in the near future, we expect to have a place for public comment where people can enter in comments about the reviews, as well as a feature that will allow you to connect with particular districts or specific users who use the materials so that you can get a personal recommendation. That is built into the contract, and we hope that will be there by June.
Thank you. We still have quite a few board members with questions or comments, and we don't have a motion on the table. Member Hanson?
I'll make a motion that we approve this item number 5 on the
4.5.
consent calendar, 4.5.
From the consent calendar, there is a motion from Member Hanson to approve 4.5. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. You want a discussion to the motion?
If I can speak to the motion. I understand the concerns that have come up, and we are maybe taking a closer look at some of these things now than we have in the past. This is an ongoing process, so it's been going on for years and years. We've had this pipeline of textbooks that are being approved by the same process. And to hold it up now and say we're going to revisit these particular books next month or the month after that, I just think is not value added. If we need to look at the process, let's get that on an agenda in one of our committees. Let's look at the process and figure out who the reviewers are, how we need to instruct them, what kind of rubrics they need to use. And then we'll get the output that we want later. But to go in and just nitpick and look at 1 or 2 reviews at this time, I don't think that's a good use of the board's time. So I would I would urge
Okay,
you all to vote to move this forward. And then those who are interested, it only takes a couple of us to get this up to board leadership. We can get it on agenda and we can look at the process.
Okay, now we're speaking to the motion. Member Hart,
Do I have to, oh.
you're on.
It's live, okay. Just out of, I'm not going to be able to support that motion out of an abundance of caution in trying to be preventative, in responding to actual events. I just think we cannot afford to put materials forward knowing what we know now. For instance, I'm concerned that we might be looking at curriculum that have pieces that are online that can be changed. So what the reviewer saw may not be what the district ends up using. I don't think that, I think there's more harm in putting forward materials than there is in stopping the process, looking at the process closely, and making sure that what we put out as supported materials and then what districts or LEAs are choosing to use, we're not causing them harm. It's almost like a do no harm kind of thing. So I am very worried about this because living through being on the ground floor with instructional materials being questioned is completely disruptive to students, staff, and parents have legitimate concerns. So I think this is extremely important to get right, and I don't want anything to come from this board before we do that work. And I think our districts and LEAs depend on us for that. So, and I would also like to say that this is a result of experience and what's happening now and current events and how curriculum has changed and become more, curriculum materials have become more dynamic. It isn't a fault of what we necessarily were doing, because that was an appropriate process, in my opinion. It's just based on what we know now, we can do better, and I want to support those efforts.
May I add a quick comment to that,
Okay.
Board Chair?
Just following everyone in the queue, Member Earl, we have 3 additional comments or questions to the motion. Member Earl?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think another month to go through this, go through things is completely out of line by any stretch of the imagination. It still allows, I'm sure, those producers of the product, it doesn't prohibit us from beginning the next section of it, but I think there is some valid concerns for whatever comes out of our office, that we make sure that it is reaching a certain criteria, and it is a different time frame we're in, so.
Okay. Vice Chair Davis?
Yeah, I'm going to speak for the motion, just because this is a resource for our local LEAs to use. They, though, have the responsibility to review whatever materials it is that they use. And some sounds like policy saying they can't review materials unless it's on this list. But certainly, they still have the onus to review the materials. Now, I think all these points that have been made today are really valid, actually. And I think perhaps we may need a study session on this, or an opportunity to delve into this further. But I haven't heard anything today that says in the next 2 months, we're going to do A, B, C, and D to fix our list to move forward. And so without having a plan and all of that, I mean, I think we move forward with the work that's been done here, knowing the onus is on the LEA to do the review. And then if we need to bring an agenda item up or a study session to really dig in, what does the rubric all entail? Could we look at some minimum requirements for narrative? What are some things that we could do to improve the process moving forward? I think that may be a better direction than to just say all of the hours that have gone in so far. Now, if this was a list that everybody had to use, I would have a different story right now. But it's not. It's an opportunity for them to say, here's some comments, here are the rubrics that reviewers have used. Now, as an LEA, let's do our own review and see what we think about the material. So I'm going to speak for the motion.
Okay. Member Straight?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I feel very conflicted. I think I'm in a moment of a crisis of trust in my life, and I see myself questioning many things. We've all received the emails about books in our schools, and I ask myself, well, how did it get there? And I find that it's not necessarily because anyone tried to do anything nefarious or anything, and I'm going from an assumption that some of those things are inappropriate, which may or may not be a proper assumption. But I want to trust. I want to be able to move forward. I do want to provide support for our LEAs. But I ask myself the question as we look at these reviews, are we in alignment with our core standards? Because if all these materials are in alignment with our core standards, then that increases my level of trust. But if there's a large amount of bias or things like that, then yeah, I'm putting myself on the line. But that's what we do. We're elected to put ourselves on the line, and I understand that responsibility. But I'm asking myself, with all this voluminous amount of information, is it in alignment? And why am I having such a hard time with my own sense of trust? I'm going to support it, but I have some reservations. But I know that I need to make a decision. And yeah, maybe it could wait longer, but I want to trust. I want to trust the process. So, Chair, would it be appropriate to call the question?
Yeah, you could. I don't see anybody else in the queue except for,
Okay.
I was going to make a comment, but I'll reserve my comment. So I'll just to save a little bit of time. So the motion before the board is to approve the item 4.5 from the general consent calendar, which is the Utah State Instructional Materials from the Utah State Instructional Materials Commission. Not seeing any other comments, so let's vote on this. Again, the motion before the board is to approve item 4.5 that's on our general consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Will the ayes raise your hand? Well, yeah, you call them out. What do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, the motion fails. Okay, thank you. But I will say this, please, thank you for your work. And also those that did all the work to bring this before the board. Thank you. What's that? Yeah, that's it on the consent. Okay,